And now you're going to meet a very funny man. Welcome, Dave Allen.
Your host for the evening, Mr. Dave Allen.
The other fellow going across the road, and every time he puts his foot in, he goes, cars, cars. And the fellow goes up and he says, there's a zebra crossing up there. He says, well, I hope he's having better luck than me. Watson, the poison from this dart is not sucked from your posterior. Within the next 15 seconds, you shall die. So what's going to happen? You're going to die.
For the show, probably outwardly, I'm very calm, very quiet, but inside, it's like a train terminal, rush hour. Things are all zinging and zanging, and my words and what I'm going to talk about.
I often wonder whether God has got a sense of humor. I hope he has. I'm in trouble if he hasn't.
When you hear the name Dave Allen, what do you think of, first of all? Finger? Alcohol? Smoking?
Very good looking. Very Irish looking.
Sitting on a stool, telling stories. Glass in his hand, making people laugh, yeah.
Priests, they want to get married. I feel that if a priest meets another priest and they like one another, sure.
For me, Dave Allen was constantly full of mischief and outrage.
You look at the controversy that he sparked.
I'm an atheist, thank God.
I think that's how important he is as a comedian, as a comic.
He had a genuinely serious side and thought he could say something important.
My mum likes you.
I meet people now, if they find out I'm Dave Allen's son, they kind of grab me and they go, you don't understand, your dad made such a massive impact on my parents' life. You know, we loved him.
As you know, the name is Dave Allen. I'd also like to tell you I come from a little country in the world called Ireland. And like most Irishmen, I live in England. And in Ireland, we have a very old saying in which we say, when you can see the mountains, it's going to rain, and when you can't see the mountains, it's raining.
Davey's grandmother was a journalist, poet, and her sister, his great-aunt, was the poet Catherine Tynan.
I was born in the country. We lived in a kind of big, kind of rambly house about 5-6 miles outside Dublin.
I know he and his brothers, like to get up to mischief, playing and getting into trouble and getting grubby.
I was 5 years of age when I started to smoke. My brothers, they smoked, so I smoked because I wanted to be like them. The parents would spend all the time going, come on, come in, come on, whoa, 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 come in. And we'd all, like a pack of dogs, in we come. And we'd all sit there and then we'd say, what do we do? Well, let's go out again. My father was known as the clown prince of Irish journalism. He was a great character in Dublin journalism. People say to me, oh, your dad was a wonderful man.
School was a huge influence for Davey. He found the schools he went to very authoritarian. Of course, there was, huge emphasis on Catholicism.
It's extraordinary, when you're told that you're 7 years of age and you've got to go confess. I mean, and you get into this little dark box and confess. I used to make them up. I used to be in there.
Kids were evil, weren't they? They had terrible, impure thoughts, and they had to be moulded into what the church wanted them to be, or teachers thought they should be.
They hit me, they pulled my hair, they punched me, they demeaned me. And I mean, now I kind of think about it, and I'm quite angry because none of them were qualified teachers, none of them.
Luckily enough, he was bright enough to question it, and he continued to question it, and he always questioned it.
I was educated by the Carmelite nuns, the Gestapo in drag. Have you ever burnt yourself? Yeah, I burnt myself on the candle. What was it like? Oh, very sore. Can you imagine that pain all over your body? That's what will happen to you if you do not love God. What do you think of that? I love him.
I think what was going on with Davey at school was completely the opposite of what was going on in his home life. It was very open-hearted and open-minded.
My father was quite a storyteller. One of our great joys on a cold night was to have a big fire and for him to tell stories. And at the end of the story, then we were sent off into this rattling house, frightened the shit out of you. I have extraordinary dreams, too, about my father, where I find him. And he is now younger than I. I mean, because I'm past him now. And I always ask him why he went away. Why did he go away? And he has some sort of reason that he had to go. He couldn't tell anybody, but he had to go.
Losing Cully, I mean, couldn't have been more momentous. The effect for the family was huge. Their life became very insecure, financially and in every other way. When Davy was about 16, the family came to England.
I think as he grew up, it was almost taken for granted that he'd follow in his father's footsteps and be a journalist.
I came to England hoping that within 6 months I would be the top of the pile in Fleet Street and would have my own byline that would be the great reporter. But the gentleman who sat at the editorials table didn't quite agree with me, so I went to Butlins.
Butlins, Butlins, Butlins by the sea. There's a holiday that's full of fun for Mum and Dad and everyone at Butlins by the sea.
I got a job as Butlin Redcoat for the summer.
See a show if you want to.
The Redcoats used to put a show on themselves, kind of review type thing.
At Butlins by the sea.
Just stole bits here and sketches there and odd song, and somebody wrote a little song and things like that. And I was in it. I was in some of the sketches. And one night I ran on stage to get into the sketch, and I caught my arm in the tab or the curtain pull, the rope on the side which pulls the rope, without knowing it. And I ran straight on stage, and this thing came to an end and just threw me right up in the air. I mean, I did a total flip and landed on my face. And the audience laughed for 2 minutes solid. And everybody on stage laughed for 2 minutes. And every backstage laughed for 2 minutes. And I didn't feel any pain because of the laughter. But once the laughter was over, I felt enormous pain. And people are saying to me, you've got to keep that in. And week after week, I would try and do it, and it never worked. Then they gave me a kind of 5 or 6 minute spot on the Redcoat show, and that was really where it developed. I suppose there was a kind of dormant fool lying in me. And then when the summer season came to an end, I decided that I would go to working men's clubs, which they have in England, and try and earn a living at it. And I starved for about 2 years, but I was learning. My surname is Tynan O'Malley, and I'd arrive at places and it would be Dave O'Malley or Maloney. I by then had an agent, Richard Stone, and I was sitting looking at his list of clients, and there was nobody with an A. So I thought, well, if I had a surname beginning with A, I'd be top of the list. So I changed my name to Alan. So I'm stuck with it now.
Walking back to happiness, oh, yeah. Said goodbye to loneliness, oh, yeah. I never knew I'd miss you, now I know.
He had a real affinity with the Beatles. Coming from Liverpool, they had an affinity with Irish culture and Irish wit anyway, and so there was a natural connection. That was an amazing experience, and it drew him into the pop culture of the 1960s.
I worked with Sophie Tucker in South Africa. I meet this amazing woman. She was absolutely extraordinary.
I'm the last of the red hot mamas. They've all...
And she advised me to go to Australia. Without me knowing it, she wrote to the agent in Australia and said, I've seen a young comic and I think he's quite good. And if you ever have a chance to offer some work, give him a chance. I think he's worth it.
He's just completed a tour with Sophie Tucker, and he's a very funny man. Welcome, Dave Allen.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, and good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Morning, chap. Some of us are going to lose limbs, some of us are going to lose life, but I am not afraid. One of the soldiers stepped out and he says, "Why is that, sir?" He said, "I'm not going." Don't stop.
And the company, or a television company, offered me a pilot show for a chat show.
Ladies and gentlemen, how about a great big warm welcome, please, from Miss Rose Takali.
They wanted to do a kind of Tonight type show, like a Jack Parr American type chat show. They gave me a pilot, and it took off.
Is there any story behind the missing finger? Oh, yes.
So there's a little...
Shouldn't put your fingers where they oughtn't to be.
With an open end, so it meant that if it was going well at 90 minutes, you didn't chop into it. You finished maybe 10, 15 minutes longer. But it was great because it was live, and you had to learn quickly.
He was an iconoclast, and he was an individual, and he had his own view of the world. The Australians are iconoclastic. They don't take rules from anybody very much. And so Dave, of course, of all things, they loved him.
Where were you born?
In Ireland.
Whereabouts in Ireland?
A little place called Dublin.
What colour pyjamas do you wear? None. I don't know.
There was always games going on. The crew had a rubber python, and suddenly this thing comes from nowhere. Four-letter word came out, everything. It's as close as I ever came to shitting myself.
I went to Australia, and we played all the theatres that David played. And I used to say rather casually, he's a great friend of mine, you know. Well, then they all went raving mad.
I didn't know what he was, who he was, or why. I was only 6. My first memory of him was seeing both my mother, who I adored, and David embracing and seeing my mother happy for the first time in a couple of years. For as long as he was there, making my mother happy, I was happy. Looking back, it was obvious that they were a sort of mini Airfix golden couple.
You get the other fellow books into a hotel. Half an hour later, he comes down and sees the desk clerk. He said, "I'd like to change my room." And the fellow said, "Why?" He said, "I don't like it." He said, "Well, what's wrong with it?" He said, "It's on fire." Good night, thinking.
The BBC offered me a series with Val Doonigan as a resident comedian, which was exactly what I needed.
And I remember as a kid watching him on the Val Doonigan show. He had about 5 minutes a week, and he made an instant impact. People were talking about him because he wasn't like anything else.
If it wasn't for the fact that you wear different clothes and you're obviously about 10 years older, I would have sworn you were Dave Allen. Now, you're not related to him in any way, are you?
No, not at all.
I would say that would be the break in English television for me.
Mr. Henry Cooper.
And they pay you money for that?
They say that the only way to get out of a car underwater is to allow the pressure in the inside of the car to be exactly the same as the outside, isn't that right?
That's absolutely true, yes.
The car thing was actually quite an interesting piece of television. It was experimentation. It was live television. It was necessary to do things like that. So we got a big tank. We got a glass tank. We got underwater cameras, but we couldn't get a cameraman, so we had to strap them in the back. and we dropped his car into the tank. And we had 2 air tanks, just in case something happened, so we could breathe.
It'll come in fairly quick because we've got holes.
And the car was filling up with water, and I tapped one of the tanks, and one went bong, and the other one went bing. They'd only put 1 full tank in, and I thought, Jesus, if this goes wrong, you're going to see the real underwater fight.
Get your head right to the front. We've got about this quite a bit of water in our
Okay, well, I think we ought to start getting out in just a few minutes. We'll go over. Okay.
I got quite a lot of letters, and I still keep in touch with somebody in Glasgow. They'd taken their son to Ayr one day, and they'd parked on the harbour, and they'd gone out to get an ice cream, and they turned around, the car had gone into the harbour. And there were people diving in left, right, and centre, and suddenly the kid popped up. They said, you know, how did you manage to do that? And he said, I'd seen Dave Allen do it.
Well, there we are, ladies and gentlemen. That does complete the show. I hope you have learned something tonight. I don't mean that you're all going to go driving off and go into a river. But if you do ever, by chance, go into a river, allow the car to fill up with water and stay there for a long time. Good night, and may God go with you.
The Dave Allen Show.
There was Morecambe and Wise, there was the 2 Ronnies. They were the big vehicles, I suppose, at the time. And in the Morecambe and Wise show, the 2 Ronnie shows, they were sort of quite traditional entertainment structured shows. Dave Allen at large was a little bit different because of the nature of his comedy. You had to construct a different shape of show.
There was a special thing, Dave Allen's on tonight. In our house, Dave Allen's on tonight. No, Dave Allen's tonight. Oh, I love Dave. Oh, Dave Allen's on tonight.
He just sat there, attractive, beautifully Irish, and told the most outrageous joke.
2 Irish fellas open a bar, and nobody ever comes in. Nobody comes in to drink. And one says, I think we'll open a brothel. He said, that'd be no good. If we can't get them to drink beer, how the hell are we going to get them to drink broth?
You really enjoy seeing how much your parents enjoyed this. Because as a kid, you didn't understand a lot of the humour. And you wouldn't perhaps get the bits your parents were howling with laughter about. You say, what's funny about that? And they used to go, I'll tell you when you're older.
I would sit there laughing, my English dad would sit there laughing, and my Irish mum would sit there crossing herself furiously. Start with the gentle, slow one at the start, but by the end it was like you could power small farms with the energy created by my mum crossing herself.
I think Dave Allen at Large was a fairly simple format, really. It was about half Dave chatting and half sketches, and I think that was the basic idea. And the linking of the sketches was very sketchy.
Oh, for God's sake.
Go to it!
I think when you were a kid, you used to enjoy the stupidness of his sketches and bits of comedy, the slapstickness.
So got a last request.
See, I would like my brother to go. He had nothing to do with the crime.
Oh, I believe you. He may go then.
Seemed to have this obsession with Mexican firing squads for some reason.
The fire!
One of Dave's classic jokes, I think, was he was going to be shot at dawn.
You are entitled to one last request.
And of course, we all know what it's going to be. He asked for the girl.
The rest of the soldiers are smoking a cigarette, looking, eating.
Then you get dusk, you get nightfall, and suddenly then you get, early in the morning, sun rising, and they're all tired, they wake up. And of course, eventually, the officer goes up, bangs on the bunker door.
It's mañana!
You're too late. He's dead.
It was a very simple joke, and I wish I'd written it.
A lot of gags, sketch gags, can come from observation. I did a sketch gag of a street cleaner sweeping out. And I was watching one. I was sitting again in a traffic jam watching this man sweeping the streets. And he came to the edge of the curb. And I really wanted him, in my own mind, physically, I wanted him to bend down and pick up the edge of the curb and sweep the dirt underneath.
Most of his notes were written on the back of disused envelopes, dry cleaning bills and receipts. And you'd pick up a piece of paper and it would say hypnotised chickens or nuns farting next to lilies, and that would turn into some material typed up on PV's manual typewriter.
Spies again.
We had an enormous number of writers sending in material, and I was editing, and so we were filming quickies all over the place.
5, 4, 3, take 1.
Really? Try again. One more then. But inside. What do you understand? Inside.
Mine's not here. 530, take 2.
Action! Your Majesty!
The original team that started was Ronnie Brodie, Michael Sharville-Martin, Ian Burford, and myself, and we were the 4.
327, take 2.
What game do these knights play, Merlin?
'Tis said he who? I'm sorry. 'Tis said that he who draws... 'Tis said that he who draws the stork...
I did nuns, I did Sleeping Beauty, I was always old ladies. One of the very first sketches I did, he was standing there, Natch, as a priest. The whole idea was that the flames of Satan came spewing out from the grave at a vast rate. Well, it didn't work on the first take, so some prop boy went off, came back, went whatever into the grave hole, and we all, okay, get ready, take 2. The prop boy threw a match into the grave. He'd filled it with petrol. All I can say is, I then saw a Mr. Allen with singed eyebrows, singed hair. Luckily, he kept his face.
The gags had to have a flavour of realism. From a designer's point of view, that's what made it really interesting. You couldn't just cod up a church, because it didn't work with Dave.
One day we built Stonehenge, and it was very nearly full size. I mean, it was absolutely enormous, and it was all made of polystyrene.
Phase 3B, 1540.
The sketches were fun, but actually, for me, the monologues were the iconic moments.
And I walked into a pub the other day where a dog had done something. And I stood on it and skidded right across the room. Boom! Nearly broke my head on the wall. And I get my booze and I'm sitting in the corner and a fella comes in and he does exactly what I did. He went, shoom, shoom, straight into the wall. And I ran over and picked him up and I said, I just did that. He nearly murdered me.
When we first started, he actually had the script in front of him. You could see him looking down, which wasn't very good. Then later on, we had the script, or the ideas for the script, on idiot cards.
We sat in the front row with these big boards in front of our knees. The way Dave remembered paragraphs or pages of material was very often by a single phrase. And some of these single phrases were outrageous.
There's a really intriguing thing about Dave Allen when he talks to the audience. He's brilliant. He's very much a barroom raconteur in some ways.
And we were in a bar and we'd had a couple of drinks. And somebody started to talk about the unknown, the spirit world.
And he had a way of going sideways at jokes. He was never sort of full on.
That I accepted a dare or a bet that I would stay the night in the cottage beside the graveyard.
He sat down, he was relaxed, he'd have his arm on this little table, he'd pause and have a whiskey, blow on his fag, and he'd just talk down the lens at you.
And I felt something on my chest begin to move. It crept slowly up my chest, came closer, nearer, and I grabbed it, and it was wet and cold, and I bit it, and screamed with pain, and that is how I lost my faith. And now, for all the people who had nothing to complain about in last week's show, get your pens out because it's complaint time.
I wish to protest most strongly about the Dave Allen show. Last night's show was disgraceful.
The sight of Dave Allen getting cheap laughs to his mixture of smut and profanity is, to say the least, nauseating.
No, I think they got it wrong, actually. The church are dangerous and the politicians are dangerous. He was just showing you how ridiculous they were.
How the BBC censors could allow such blasphemous rubbish to be shown at Easter time or any other time is beyond my comprehension.
I think it's a very difficult thing, censorship, because what you're doing is that you're putting your code on millions of viewers, which is a very difficult thing to do. And with the BBC, they've been very good to me. I mean, I do get away with a lot of things that other comedians wouldn't even attempt. But that is me. And if they put reins on me, it's not me. It would be a shadow of what I am.
Dave Allen was far more subversive than just about any other comic on TV. He did a sketch about apartheid.
Hey, you boy. Yes, sir. What are you doing in this church? You know blacks are not allowed in this church.
Oh, yes, Father, but I'm cleaning the floor.
Ah, cleaning the floor, eh? Good, but don't let me catch you praying.
I remember turning to my dad and saying, "What's that about?" My dad explained apartheid to me on the back of a Dave Allen sketch.
He had a huge personal integrity about what he wanted to say.
I even had a telegram from Rome, from the boss himself. Hey, what's the matter, David, baby?
I can understand why he was considered dangerous by the Catholic Church and why he wasn't popular in Ireland because of it. Ireland in the 60s and 70s was a very deeply conservative country. In any rural Irish village, the priest is pretty much the most important person in there.
The usual, Father.
God.
The sketches, they were just silly, but they undermined the authority of priests.
If somebody's saying, I'm going to blow you up, you don't kind of take too many chances about it.
Was it because of your gags?
Yes, I think so, I suppose so.
What type of gag would they have objected to?
Most of them.
Dave said what he wanted to say. He was an adult, he was a professional, he worked out a way to say it, but you didn't get very far saying to Dave, I don't think we should do a joke about the Pope. Concept at that time of the Pope in anything less than 15 layers of linen stuff and a gold thing over the top and that's how you saw the Pope. And suddenly you could see his naked leg. It was shocking. I mean, it genuinely was shocking.
It upset people. I mean, teachers at school would tell us off for watching it, and my mum was horrified by it. And she would sit there telling me and my dad that we would go to hell for laughing.
How do you become Jewish quickly?
Some people think Davy was anti-religion, and actually he wasn't. He had a huge respect for religions, but what he didn't like was being told what to think. He didn't like brainwashing. And he didn't like a sort of prescribed guilt.
Good night, and may your God go with you.
with my family and my children. I mean, they know that I have something to do with show business, but they're not all that sure what I do, except that I'm not a real daddy, because real daddies go to work on trains.
You know, certainly when I was young and friends came over, they didn't really know who he was anyway, because you just wouldn't. You know, we weren't allowed to watch that when we were little. Too rude, Mummy said. I think I wanted to really be like him. I do remember being out with him sometimes and people would say, oh, you know, hi, Dave, and I would go, no, he's my daddy, you know, not really kind of getting that and thinking, I don't want to share him, you know.
When he started out, I was a bit young. I was probably 5 or 6 when he started doing Dave Allen Live. So I got friends of mine who were kind of a bit older. They're like 5 years older than me. And they say to me, Ed, you don't know, like, there'll be no one on the streets. Everyone will be watching your dad, you know. He said, you don't get it.
We had a house in Devon. It was set in a valley with a stream going through it, and all of us adored it.
Lots of people would come and join us, cousins and like friends of my big brothers from school. It was a house full of people, people that were all, you know, quite close, which was lovely.
There would always be like loads of children down there, and all the adults would chip in and have a laugh. They were like kids as well.
The children loved it. They just loved him. He was like, you know, he'd be like the Pied Piper. They'd all sort of trail after him. But he found them fascinating and funny. And he kind of discussed things very seriously with them. They had great respect for him.
Jane and Ed and Toby and I, you know, we kind of all of us grew up together because we were all the same age. My memories of Dave were usually very scruffy. The person I remember had absolutely nothing to do with the persona of the man sitting in the chair with the cigarette and the drink. Completely different. I mean, the cigarette and the drink were there, but where he got the suits from, I certainly never saw them.
It gives me great pleasure tonight to present to you, ladies and gentlemen, the curse of the werewolf.
We used to turn the lights off, and he used to just have a candle going, and he would spend half an hour telling a ghost story.
It was just another excuse for him to put the crappers up. Usually something around a fire, and it was usually terrifying. And my brother, Toby, being absolutely kind of, you know, because, yes, and then, you know, they came and they ate the child, and my poor brother going, oh my God!
This is massive sort of kids, like in one bunk bed, frightened, jumping at every kind of creak in the house and everything.
All through the time he was known as a comedian performing on BBC, he made these documentary shows.
Without a doubt, in my mind, the most enchanting place that I have ever been. They came seeking the great American dream, equality, tolerance, religious freedom, money. Hi, nice to meet you. My name is Dave Allen. Oh. I think people are marvelous. I would probably draw the line with politicians. I don't consider them as people. But in general, I mean, I'm very fond of people.
Ain't no use to be fighting against each other. I mean, right here in Wintersburg, we can all live together.
Eccentricity is in the air we breathe. It's part of the English tradition, and it's been that way for so long, we've created a special sanctuary for eccentrics.
Dave had spoken to Lou Grade of fond memory about doing what he called a more serious programme. It all began with a 1-hour documentary in search of the great English eccentric. For 10 years, it was the highest rated documentary on British television.
I've had a bit of a job finding you. I didn't realise you lived in a little house like this.
Yes, try to live here.
How long have you been living in here?
Well, I should imagine 25 years.
No, it's not a very big bed. I mean, how do you lie down there?
Oh, I can't really lay down. I put an extension for the feet, as you see.
Can I see that?
Yeah, yes.
And you put your feet in there, do you?
Yes.
The first rule we made was that we weren't going to put mad people on television. Now, that immediately created the world's most difficult defining line.
Now bring your mouse to Snowy. Oh, bring your mouse to Snowy.
What we learnt eccentricity was passion.
That's nice, isn't it?
And to live your life as you saw it
with complete commitment and complete attention to detail, but not giving a hell as to what other people thought.
Snowy, tell me, how do you live?
I live off my land, yes. I've got 2 pieces of allotment, you see. I grow potatoes and also greens, most of them January King, which are very nice, and Brussels and carrots, whichever the case. So I live off my land, you see.
That's all you eat?
That's all I eat. I eat like the rabbits, you see, vegetables, you see, and I don't drink nothing no stronger than water.
He loved eccentricity. He wasn't eccentric himself, really. And he loved slightly mad people, and he loved stories. If somebody could tell him a story, or somebody could show him something crazy, you know, if a man could suck a halfpenny up his nose, Dave would be there watching him. That was Dave.
That's handed over to me now. Is there any kind of word said or anything?
No, Dave never, ever giggled. I mean, he really just thought, you know, how happy all these people were. He was capable of suspending judgment entirely. In fact, even that's not quite the right phrase, because he wasn't suspending it. It was as if he had no judgmental thing.
This block here is white, Spanish, Negro, and everybody's together. But you got up the next block and you got just Jews. You don't see nobody else up there, just Jewish people. They own practically everything around here, and they got us as workers, and they don't want to pay us nothing, you know?
In America, there was an entirely different breed of people that we found. Half of them were showmen, which is a characteristic I'm sure is built into a lot of Americans. The other half were demonstrating something.
We're out to show that Jewish rights are no less than those of other people, and that the Jew is not the easy mark that certain people think he is. We're tired of having to be the victims.
What you're actually teaching here is a kind of form of militancy.
Yes, yes.
But if you teach this here, surely other groups, say anti-Semitic groups, are going to teach it as well.
Unless this force stands up now and says, that's it, then what happened in Germany will happen here.
I think the heartbeat of Dave Anna was really curiosity, that he always asked the question why. It was just going out and finding people and spending time with them and talking to them and showing them as they were. In his reporting, one of the things that stands out was the fact that he approached it almost like he was by your side rather than standing above you telling you things, that he made you a fellow observer. And that was something that made his work so intimate and so engaging and so real. He, again, really pioneered a way of doing documentaries that went on to inspire the likes of Louis Theroux and many other people.
At Speaker's Corner in London, anyone can stand up and say exactly what they like.
The minister has to mind his P's and Q's while I'm the world's greatest dictator. Great Britain is the most beautiful country in the world. That's right, that's why we're here. There's only one thing wrong with it, the English.
There are days, obviously, that you don't want people, but there are days that you adore the world and you love people to a great extent. I think people are people. I'm a person. I'm people. And I would hope that I would treat people as they in turn would treat me.
I know this sounds a bit far-fetched, but my feeling was that Dave was looking for the meaning of life.
You have a philosophy in life.
Well, I don't call it philosophy, you know. There's too much of a loss in that. I like to be on the gaining side of things.
No matter how weird they were, there was something that he was learning from people in that way.
I recently became legitimate. You've got filthy mouth. By that I mean that I became a straight actor. As far back as late November, I played the part of a straight actor in a straight play.
It was a very important part of his persona. He was an artist, and he saw what he did as one branch of being an artist. And so when he was offered the opportunity to play some pretty substantial roles, he jumped at it, and he was very good in them.
Who's the father?
Fathers.
You shut up!
I remember going to see him in the Edna O'Brien play at the Royal Court Theatre.
I wouldn't mind a chaser.
I knew that he'd been offered the lead role in it, to which he'd refused. because he'd never actually done much straight theatre. And he took a part, which was the part of the Doctor. It was a wonderful performance.
Doctor, can I have a word with you? In private.
Look, all the private shite is over. It's now in the public domain.
I suggest we set out in the morning, yourself, the boss, the mother and me, and find your Romeo.
There was a few punch-ups outside the theatre when the show was on, you know.
He enjoyed championing events and being involved in them if they were going to challenge people's conceptions and also challenge the authority and the establishment.
Is that your homemade blackberry wine?
It is.
Do you have any gin? Any dry satin gin?
I think he appreciated the art of performance. And that made him, for me, someone special.
Dave always wanted to stretch himself as an actor, and he really admired playwrights like Alan Bennett. And so when One Fine Day came along as a project, he was very keen to do it.
He's threatening to take me to a topless steakhouse. Cheer up.
I always got the impression he was quite choosy. And, you know, it was quite, you know, good for us that he picked us up, that he agreed to do it.
How's your good lady? How's the carpentry? She put up any more shelves?
No, I think we're well catered for her in the shelf department.
Huh. She's a remarkable woman.
She's in Colchester for a few days, looking after her father.
Colchester, really? I went to the Chinese mill there.
It was comic, so you wanted someone with a sense of humour, and you wanted someone who was thoughtful, you know, where there was more going on inside, behind his eyes, inside his brain. So you were playing somebody who was thinking a lot. Well, Dave never stopped thinking. You know, if you're a stand-up comic, I guess that's what you do. It was untypical of Alan's writing. Normally, Alan wrote about these northern comic characters like Thora Hird and Patricia Routledge, and this was a much more sort of impressionistic piece. He could hold the camera. If you'd start a shot, he could keep it interesting. That's what movie stars have. You start watching them and then you follow them, and there's no need to cut the camera because they're inherently interesting. You just believed in him. He was in front of you, you believed in him. That was all you needed, really.
Dangerous, and this is avian dangerous.
People often say to me, Alexei, what is alternative new wave Marxist comedy? And I say, sod off, you nosy bastard.
When alternative comedy came along, Dave had a sufficient field of his own, which they didn't impinge upon.
He had the ethos of alternative comedy before we did, in that comedy could be not only funny, but could be challenging.
Before alternative comedy, he was a man who went out there and said, I don't give a fuck about what they're saying. This is the truth. This is what I want to say, and I'm going to say it.
He did the Strand theatre shows, and on the first night, it was like who's who of all the young comedians. They all turned up to see Dave.
I know comics who would say that man inspired me to get up on stage. He was inspiring people like us to get up and to do it.
I did a lot of photographs in the dressing room. It was in Fairfield Hall, Croydon. Not many people see this, you know. The intimacy of the dressing room before he goes on stage, and, you know, and he's getting ready, and I've got him DJ on, you know, looking in the mirror. He's very quiet and, you know, not much talking. And just before he goes on stage, he was standing in the doorway of his dressing room. Took a couple of shots, and he's standing there with a glass of champagne, just looking away from the camera. Very, you know, just the moment before he has a sip and then walks on.
You're offering yourself up, in a way. You're not actually placing your head down on the plate, but you're saying, this is it, this is me, this is, we're going to be here for the next 2.5 hours. All of us. And we're either going to have a good time or we're going to have a rotten time.
When Dave confronted a real live audience,
you could see the change that came over him. He sort of flowed out to the audience, and he was a master of the situation. He commanded that hall, which was sometimes quite a big theatre, immediately, and you could feel the audience, a sort of wave of love coming back.
There's a funny thing that goes on with that audience, and that audience wants Dave to like them.
I get tremendous pleasure from watching people physically bend forward and laugh, and people wiping their eyes. I'm bubbling inside. I mean, there's the other side of it. There's a performer outside of me. That's not. But inside, I'm looking at somebody and I think, isn't that marvelous? Look at her. Her mascara is running all over the place.
Thank you. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you, good evening, and welcome to the show. As you can see, the show has no music, no titles, no actors, no costumes, no sketches. Let's be honest, it's cheap.
There's something about him which was eternally young. So even when he got into his 50s and 55 and 60s, he was a vital comedian.
And the great disappearing lavatory paper act. Have you come across that? No adult, when you go to the lab, you don't check to see that the paper is there, do you?
It became much more observational. Maybe because he'd said all he had to say about the church. There is only so much hypocrisy you can expose.
The first time I saw him, I was quite a bit older, I was late teens.
My daughter Jane, I would take her to school in the morning. And not only would I take her to school in the morning, but I'd take all her friends to school in the morning as well.
He was talking about Jaina, about being at school and talking all the time and being in the back of the car and then
verbal diarrhea pouring in torrents out of all that.
I'm finding that hilarious because I know that person and it's absolutely true.
Drop him off the Bible in the Jane will go into the house, I park the car, I go into the house, she's on the phone. Who are you talking to? Belinda. Belinda lives next door.
He got a lot of laughs out of me. A lot of laughs,
Edward's friends are always ringing. I pick up the phone.
I mean, he used to do this impression of me opening a fridge. I remember I went to watch the show with a great friend of mine who used to spend a lot of time around the house, and he was completely pissing himself. I was sitting there going, that's not me. And he was going, it's you, man. I promise you, that's you.
What? My son's name is Edward. Maybe they call him Ed. I don't know. Maybe. Maybe he's saying, is Ed in?
You can't kind of ignore that kind of teenage behaviour. I mean, it's a great sort of source of humour, and also lots of people in the audience really got it as well.
Did you say, is Ed in? No, you didn't say, is Ed in, dickhead. You said, no, he's not. You wait to the clock. You go to work to the clock. You clock in to the clock. You clock out to the clock. You come home to the clock. You eat to the clock. You drink to the clock. You go to bed to the clock. You get up to the clock. You go back to work to the clock. You do that for 40 years of your life. You retire. What they fucking give you? A clock.
Just like to briefly say how utterly disgusted I was.
Dave Allen had to ruin a very good show.
Disgraceful foul language.
Oh, he used the fuck word. You're damn right he used the fuck word.
You take a very libertarian line on language.
Yeah, I think it's necessary. Language is language. I mean, language is just sound. It's only, but somebody said that's not a good sound, or that's a bad sound, or that's a rude sound. It's nothing. It's only emphasis. It's only, it's got
I think.
We were both rather surprised at the level of the controversy that happened after that show went out.
Moyer, who's head of BBC Television's Light Entertainment Group, has sent us a statement, and he says that clearly we are sorry if we have given unnecessary offence.
Unfortunately, although the BBC knew it was in the programme, when the questions were asked, they didn't really feel able to support him. He felt disappointed by that and perhaps a bit abandoned. And it took him a long time to feel that he wanted to go back on television after that incident.
We were looking for, noisy shows, big signings. And Dave hadn't worked for a time for the BBC, he hadn't worked for anybody, he'd stopped doing telly, really. And we had endless meetings at his house, and I'm sure there was a Chinese meal involved somewhere, because there always was. And we eventually persuaded him to come and do these 6 shows. We got a very good team of writers, people like Kerry Day wrote for him. He enjoyed that interaction with young up-and-coming writers.
I think the big difference was the ITV show. He was standing up and he was angry. He had more energy than he had in the 70s and 60s shows, far more energy.
Grannies! Do you ever get behind a granny in a queue?
He was looking for something to get his teeth into, to argue with almost, as part of that creative process. It was really fascinating. I loved it.
And I'm sending him the birthday presents because it's a birthday. And I'm standing behind her thinking, you old geriatric, I say die and let me buy my stuff.
My abiding memory very early on in the process of working with Dave is him telling me that he was working on this routine about teaching children to tell the time. And I distinctly remember thinking to myself, well, that's not going to change the world, Grandad, is it?
I'm going to teach you to read the time. Why? Because it's important that you know the time.
He does this routine. It's about 15 minutes live, and it got edited down when it was on the show. He does the entire routine as an imaginary conversation with a small child.
I mean, who else could do a routine about the second hand and the minute hand on a watch?
There's the hour hand. That's the first hand. The hour hand. The second hand is the minute hand, and the third hand is the second hand.
For him to point this out and bring the house down on the extraordinary contradiction just between how they're named.
So it moves away from the fat hand, leaving the fat hand at the 1 and the 2, and then it comes over to the 1 here by itself. You see the 1 to the right of the 1 and the 2? Now, that 1 is 5. Because it is, it's 5. 2 is 10, 3 is 15, 4 is 20, 5 is 25, 6 is a half.
Now I know what I can do for Dave Allen. I can make him the best darn cup of tea he's ever had, because there's not much I can bring to him in terms of writing. And that telling the time routine just summed him up.
It is now what time? It is not 5 o'clock. It's 1 o'clock.
For me, the man is a comic genius. He's a stand-up genius. That's what he does.
Shut up!
He really enjoyed working and put himself absolutely into it with great heart. But he loved being at home and domestic life and family life too. Well, Davey and I got together in 1986. Some might have said it was an unexpected coupling. He was much older than me, although the age gap never mattered, certainly not to me. He was extraordinary and extremely easy to love. Davey was a very private person, and his work was his work, and that was very separate from family life and our life together. We never courted publicity, and it was important for him to protect us from that. In his latter years, he didn't feel the need to constantly be chasing work. He used to get offered a lot of work. I mean, I think there wasn't a film made in Ireland without him being offered a part in it. He got offered a lot of television, and most of which he turned down.
For the people who will be watching the show when it is a repeat, good evening, welcome to the show. It is a repeat.
He hated repeats. I think it was a clause in his contract that they could show one series repeat. Okay, and that was it.
Everything is repeated now, apart from Dave Allen stuff. I've got a videotape of Dave. I've got a videotape of him. It's nuts. This is my comedic idol. And I've got a bloody videotape.
He was never somebody that seemed, he had regrets or, well, if only I was. He was really happy. He worked hard, he lived fully, he had a family that, adored him and who he loved, and, he had passion.
Life was very important to Davy. He had a huge appetite for life. And he loved his work, but he didn't define himself by what he did. He did his work, but he did lots of other things as well. He loved his painting and his drawing and being at home and gardening and cooking. He was disarmingly modest and quiet about his many talents, and I always think he was ordinary and extraordinary. He was normal and grounded. He was always gracious with people when they stopped him or recognised him. And yet he had these many, many abilities, but he held them quietly. When I think of Davy, I really do just think of love. And I feel like love is the most extraordinary thing. For two people to meet and fall in love with each other at the same time seems extraordinary. For that to last for decades seems miraculous, and for it only to get better seems sort of impossibly lucky. So losing Davy as I did was hard beyond description. And it's sort of like being a long way from home all the time. But 3 weeks after I lost Davy, I had our son Cully, our beautiful boy. And I think Davy would be very proud of him.
Death is inevitable. Life is what you are anyhow, which you experience now. And death is going to happen to us anyhow, so there's no sense in spending 70 years worrying about dying, because if you do, you won't even get to 40, I think. But, I really do, I as an Irishman, I've been not laughing about my own death, but laughing about death as a subject for years. Coffins and wakes and it doesn't bother me. I know that some people get a bit upset, but it's there. You might as well not laugh at the moon or not accept the existence of the sun.
I wonder what my epitaph will be. Here lies Dave Allen, a comedy fool, who drank and told gags as he sat on his stool. His last words on earth, the atheist wretch. Time for religion. Here's a sketch. There's the church.
The big question everybody asks me about Dave Allen is always, how did he lose the finger?
I've got time to ask you one more thing, and that's about your famous, the missing joint on your finger.
I've asked him that question so many times, and he's given me about 5 different stories, none of which I believe to be true.
I was about nine years of age.
What did he tell you?
Oh, all sorts of things, starting from nose-picking accident.
I was sitting there and I had something in my back tooth.
He picked his nose and lost it. I don't know how you do that.
And I was actually trying to pick it out with my finger. I was trying to get this little bit of meat.
Working up to knife fight in a Paris brothel.
And my brother, John, came in behind me and he just saw me there.
He lost it in a bet with a priest in a pub.
Wrestling or something like that. And he just came behind me and went, grab me like that. And my jaw closed and I bit my finger right through.
The final gag. He's never. Everyone always asks me that, and they don't believe me when I say I don't know. But to this day, I have no idea. I think that's fantastic.
Thank you. Good night, and may your God go with you.